The Instructor, a James Ryder Thriller by J.T. Porter.
Made with Spoken.
Chapter 1. Sergeant First Class Dominic Caruso shut his eyes and rhythmically tapped his finger on his knee to the tune playing in his mind before executing his next target. He opened his eyes and scanned the rubble-strewn street in Kandahar, Afghanistan, through his night vision goggles. The green-tinted world he viewed told a story of urban devastation, with crumbling three-story buildings, with gaping wounds where mortar rounds had struck, dangling power lines, and abandoned vehicles stripped for parts by desperate locals. The air hung thick with the acrid scent of cordite and burning wood. The Brooklyn-born squad leader of the Delta Force kill team was on his 43rd mission to eliminate an enemy of the United States and its allies. This mission took Caruso and his team to the Afghan city in the southwest corner of the country that had been a killing ground for American soldiers for months, with its narrow alleyways and concealed rooftop positions perfect for insurgent ambushes. Even now, at 02:47 hours, the distant thump of artillery fire punctuated the night, vibrations traveling through the concrete beneath Caruso's boots. Despite the cool night air, sweat trickled down his spine beneath his plate carrier as his body ran hot with the familiar tension that preceded combat. "Lost contact with the drone," Caruso whispered, his Brooklyn accent barely detectable after years of military service. He gestured toward the three-man element on his left. "Rodriguez, take point and get eyes on the second-story window in the southeast corner. Our target likes to post lookouts with clear sightlines." Staff Sergeant Rodriguez nodded once and moved forward. Unlike Caruso's solid muscular build from years of dock work and street fights before joining the military, Rodriguez possessed a thin, long-distance runner-like physique that allowed him to slip through narrow spaces while carrying a full combat load. The staff sergeant's wrinkles beneath his eyes, earned from years of lessons on the battlefield, made him look older than his 34 years. Caruso held his position, the weight of the mission pressing down on him. After weeks of intelligence gathering, they'd finally located Talib al-Hamadi, a sniper responsible for the deaths of 11 coalition troops and numerous Afghan civilians. The target had trained with the infamous Kunduz sniper in the northeast corner of Afghanistan before returning to Kandahar 2 years ago. Just last week, he'd killed a first lieutenant from the 82nd Airborne with a perfect shot from over 900 meters. Tonight, his killing spree would come to an end. A dog barked somewhere ahead, the sound echoing between buildings. Caruso raised his fist, freezing the formation until the barking faded. He touched his throat mic. "Caldwell, Jackson, maintain your position and cover the south exit. I don't want this bastard slipping away." "Copy that," came the whispered acknowledgement. Caruso gestured to Rodriguez, and they moved forward as a pair, their boots silent on the debris-covered street. 10 years of Delta Force operations had taught Caruso to move like a ghost. The lessons had started much earlier in the rough streets of Bensonhurst, where a step in the wrong territory could get your ass kicked, or worse. "Never let them know you're coming, Dominic," his father's voice echoed in his memory. "Surprise is a potent weapon." Giuseppe Caruso had worked on the Brooklyn docks for over 30 years, his hands calloused from hauling cargo and occasionally cracking skulls when the situation demanded it. He'd taught his only son how to survive in a world where respect was earned through strength and street smarts. Those lessons had followed Caruso from Brooklyn to the battlefield, shaping him into the weapon he'd become. As they approached the 3-story apartment building where Intel placed al-Hamadi, Caruso paused to study the structure. His square jaw tightened as his dark eyes traced potential firing positions. At 36, Caruso's neck and face were a roadmap of missions, scarred and stitched like a well-loved teddy bear after years of hard use. Souvenirs from his 5 deployments taught him that textbook tactics didn't always work in real-world combat. A thermal drone picked up his signature on the 3rd floor, northeast corner room before we lost connection, Caruso whispered. "He's been using the same spot for 3 days. Rodriguez checked his weapon. "Think he knows we're coming? If he did, we'd already be taking fire." Caruso studied the building's layout again. "Standard protocol calls for securing the ground floor and working our way up." "But you've got something else in mind," Rodriguez said. It wasn't a question. Caruso nodded toward a partially collapsed structure adjacent to their target. "Why walk through the front door when we can drop in from above?" First Lieutenant Stark's voice cut through on the command channel. "Caruso, the operation plan calls for a ground-level entry. Stick to the protocol." Stark was a competent officer, but inexperienced in urban combat. He ran operations by the book, which yielded results until it got people killed. With respect, sir, Al-Hamadi has booby-trapped the ground floor entries in his previous positions, Caruso replied. We have an opportunity for a rooftop insertion that he won't be expecting. The pause that followed told Caruso everything he needed to know. Stark was weighing his authority against Caruso's experience, a calculation that had played out countless times before. Your call, Caruso, but if this goes sideways... It won't. Caruso cut in, already moving toward the adjacent building. We'll approach from above. Rodriguez, you're with me. Caldwell and Jackson maintain containment positions. The adjacent structure provided perfect access to the rooftop. Caruso found handholds in the crumbling masonry, his powerful build allowing him to climb with surprising agility. The M4 strapped to his back didn't slow him as he scaled the side of the building, reaching a broken second-floor window within seconds. Rodriguez followed close behind, moving with the fluid grace that made him invaluable on all missions. They cleared the empty building floor by floor, eventually reaching the roof. Caruso moved to the edge, gauging the 3-meter gap to their target building. That's a hell of a jump, Rodriguez whispered. Caruso's mouth quirked into a half smile. We've made worse. Without hesitation, he backed up 5 paces, then sprinted forward, launching himself across the gap. He landed on the opposite roof in a controlled roll that dispersed his momentum, coming up in a crouch with his weapon ready. Rodriguez followed a moment later, executing the jump with equal success. They moved silently across the rooftop to the access door. The stairwell beyond was dark, but their night optical devices transformed the darkness into navigable green terrain. 3rd floor, northeast corner, Caruso reminded as they descended. Al-Hamadi will have a spotter. Take him first, and then we'll deal with the primary target. They moved through the 3rd-floor hallway like shadows, checking rooms as they proceeded. Most were abandoned, stripped of anything valuable by looters. The distant crack of small arms fire elsewhere in the city provided occasional background noise, but the building itself remained eerily quiet. As they approached the northeast corner room, Caruso detected movement, like someone was pacing behind the door. He signaled Rodriguez to take a position on the opposite side, then held up 3 fingers in a silent countdown. 3, 2, 1. Caruso's boots struck the door just beside the handle, splintering the frame as he crashed through in a combat crouch and weapon raised. Rodriguez followed immediately, moving left to cover the blind spots. 2 men occupied the room. A young man with a wispy beard reached for a pistol on a nearby table. Rodriguez eliminated him with 2 precise shots at center mass. The second person, an older man, with a crooked nose and cold eyes, was positioned by the window with a Russian-made Dragunov sniper rifle. Al-Hamadi. The sniper reacted with surprising speed, swinging the Dragunov toward Caruso. Years of Delta Force training took over as Caruso fired a controlled pair that caught Al-Hamadi in the chest. The sniper staggered backward, but remained standing, raising his rifle again with remarkable determination. Caruso's 3rd shot struck Al-Hamadi in the center of the forehead, dropping him instantly. The Dragunov clattered to the floor beside his body. Clear, Caruso called, moving to secure the sniper rifle while Rodriguez checked the spotter. This one's done, Rodriguez confirmed, kicking the spotter's weapon away. Caruso examined the room, taking in the sniper's nest with his typical attention to detail. Al-Hamadi had set up a textbook position clear sightlines to the main road where coalition forces regularly patrolled, concealed from outside observation with multiple escape routes. The empty food containers and water bottles indicated that he'd been in position for days. A map on the small table caught Caruso's attention. It showed Kandahar with several areas circled, some with an X through the circle, including their current location. This is where he'd been and intended to go after this, Ryder stated. Rodriguez moved next to the map and illuminated it with his headlamp. Those are heavily traveled transportation corridors. It would have been a bloodbath if we hadn't eliminated him tonight. Command, target neutralized, Caruso reported. Confirmed identity, Talib Al-Hamadi. Roger that, Stark replied, his voice professional enough to conceal the relief. Bag any intelligence materials and prep for exfil. QRF reports increased activity in adjacent sectors. Caruso turned to Rodriguez. Grab that map and any documents. We're leaving in 2 minutes. As Rodriguez collected the intelligence, Caruso moved to the window and looked out across the remnants of the Kandahar skyline. The eastern horizon had begun to lighten, signaling the approach of dawn. It was another successful mission, even if the methods wouldn't make the after-action reports look pretty. That was Dominic Caruso's reputation in a nutshell: unorthodox, effective, and utterly unapologetic when it came to getting results. It wasn't about glory or adherence to protocol. It was about completing the mission and bringing his men home alive. If that meant occasionally rewriting the playbook on the fly, so be it. The military had taught Caruso discipline, tactics, and teamwork, but it was the streets of Brooklyn that had taught him to survive. Chapter 2. The distinctive whoop-whoop of helicopter blades cut through the morning air as Dominic Caruso strode across the dusty compound of Forward Operating Base Walton. His boots left clear impressions in the Afghan dust, the ground still damp from an overnight water truck run to keep the ever-present particles at bay. The sun climbed into the horizon, its golden light spilling across the makeshift city of concrete barriers, plywood structures, and olive-drab tents that made up the American foothold in Kandahar province. 20 hours had passed since he and his team had eliminated al-Hamadi, and Caruso had managed only 3 hours of fitful sleep. Despite his exhaustion, he walked with the confidence that had become his trademark within Delta Force. Caruso spotted Sergeant Marcus Torres outside the operations center, lounging against a stack of sandbags with a steaming cup of coffee in his hand. The sight of his oldest friend within the unit brought a rare smile to Caruso's battle-hardened face. "There he is," Torres called out, raising his cup in a gesture of greeting. "The Butcher of Brooklyn returns victorious." "Keep your voice down with that nickname," Caruso barked, accepting the extra cup Torres offered. The coffee was strong enough to dissolve metal, bitter black, and scalding hot, perfect for washing away the grit of a night operation. "You know I hate that shit." Torres grinned, sunlight gleaming off his white teeth against his dark complexion. At 32, he was 4 years younger than Caruso, but they had run countless missions together since their early days in the Ranger Regiment. Compared to Caruso's solid dockworker build, Torres was shorter and stout, featuring the body of a high school wrestler. "Word is, you went off plan again," Torres said, lowering his voice. "Rooftop entry instead of a ground assault." Caruso shrugged. "Plans change when boots hit the ground. And that's why they keep sending you out despite your tendency to improvise. Did you get the bastard?" "Yeah, we got him," Ryder replied with a motion of ordering a coffee. "One less sniper picking off our boys." Torres nodded in approval, then glanced around before leaning closer. "Just got word this morning. I'm heading to Kunduz tomorrow. Command finally approved the hunt." Caruso straightened, immediately alert. The Kunduz sniper had become almost mythical among coalition forces. The ghost who appeared, killed with terrifying precision, and then vanished into the labyrinth of streets in northern Afghanistan. Official counts attributed 19 kills to him over the past year, though the actual number was likely higher. "About damn time," Caruso replied. "I've been pushing for this op since winter." "I know, thanks for that." Torres took a swig of coffee. "Captain Hayes wants me to lead a small team. In and out. Quiet. And clean. That's how we do it." Caruso couldn't suppress the anticipation building in his chest. After months of waiting, they would finally have their shot at the Kunduz sniper. "When do we brief?" Before Torres could answer, a sharp voice cut through their conversation. "Caruso, a moment." Captain Lawrence Hayes approached from the direction of the talk, his angular face set in its usual expression of controlled intensity. At 40, Hayes was older than most operators, with silver threading through his close-cropped hair at the temples. Unlike many officers who rotated through special operations, Hayes had earned the quiet respect of Delta's enlisted ranks through competence and a willingness to shield his men from bureaucratic bullshit. "Sir," Caruso straightened, instinctively shifting to a more professional stance. "Good work on al-Hamadi," Hayes said, his voice betraying nothing of his thoughts on Caruso's deviation from the mission plan. "Walk with me." Caruso caught Torres' questioning look and gave an imperceptible shrug before falling in beside the captain. They moved away from the operations center toward a quieter section of the base near the perimeter fence. "I read your after-action report," Hayes began once they were alone. "Creative solution for rooftop entry." "Thank you, sir." "I didn't say I approved." Hayes stopped walking and turned to face Caruso directly. "You're one of the best operators I've ever commanded, Caruso. Maybe the best, but your methods worry people up the chain." Caruso held the captain's gaze. "With respect, sir, my methods get results." "They do. That's why you're still here." Hayes sighed, some of his official demeanor slipping. "Which brings me to my next point. I know Torres already told you about Kunduz." Caruso nodded, anticipation building again. "I'm ready to move out whenever you give the word, sir." Hayes' expression shifted subtly. That's not why I wanted to talk to you. Sir? You're not going to Kunduz, Dom. The use of his first name caught Caruso off guard as much as the statement itself. A cold sensation settled in his stomach. I don't understand. The Taliban is experiencing a concerning resurgence, Hayes explained. Intel suggests they're rebuilding faster than anticipated. We're seeing increased activity across multiple provinces, not just isolated pockets. All the more reason to take out high-value targets like the Kunduz sniper, Caruso countered. Hayes shook his head. It's bigger than one sniper. We need more operators in the field, more men with your skills and experience. I'm sending you back to the kill school at Fenty. Caruso felt as if he'd been struck with a roundhouse punch. The kill school was Delta's specialized training program for developing elite manhunters, operators who could track, locate, and eliminate high-value targets with surgical precision. He had served as an instructor there 2 years ago, helping shape raw talent into the kind of weapon he had become. Sir, with all due respect, my place is in the field, especially on this hunt. Your place is where I need you most, Hayes replied, his tone hardening slightly. And right now, I need you to train the next generation. The school's standards have slipped since you left. The last 3 classes haven't produced operators of the caliber we need. Caruso struggled to maintain a neutral expression. Torres and I have been tracking the Kunduz sniper's patterns for months. We know his methods better than anyone. Torres is more than capable of leading the hunt himself, Hayes said. You've taught him well, and he has everything he needs to succeed. The words stung despite their complimentary nature. Caruso had been preparing for this mission since the Kunduz sniper first appeared on their radar. To be sidelined now felt like a betrayal, not just of his own ambitions, but of the promise he'd made to the families of those the sniper had killed. The kill school's mission is now priority 1, Hayes continued when Caruso remained silent. If we don't get control of this resurgence, we'll be facing a dozen Kunduz snipers by this time next year. I need you to build me hunters, Caruso. Hunters like you. Caruso gazed past Hayes toward the mountains, where somewhere among the valleys and villages, fighters were gathering strength once again. The captain's logic was sound, even if he hated to admit it. One sniper versus dozens of future threats. The strategic calculation was clear. When do I leave for Fenty Forward Operating Base? He finally asked, resignation evident in his voice. Transport leaves at 0600 tomorrow. The new class starts in 3 days. Caruso nodded. And Torres's team? Moves out for Kunduz province at the same time. Hayes studied Caruso's face for a moment. This isn't a punishment, Sergeant Caruso. It's recognition of your value. I understand the mission, sir. Hayes seemed to recognize that further discussion would be pointless. The briefing packet for the kill school will be in your quarters in 1 hour. Review it, then get some actual sleep. You look like hell. Yes, sir. With a final nod, Hayes turned and walked back toward the operations center, leaving Caruso alone with his thoughts. The fence line offered a view of the fields where local men have cultivated crops for thousands of years, oblivious to the wars that periodically swept across their homeland. The sound of approaching footsteps pulled Caruso from his contemplation. Torres stopped beside him, reading his mood with the ease of a long friendship. He's not sending you to Kunduz, is he? Torres asked quietly. No, I'm headed back to Fenty, kill school instructor. Shit. Torres was silent for a moment. I was counting on having you along. Hayes thinks you're ready to lead it yourself, Caruso replied, forcing a neutral tone. They strolled toward the motor pool, an unspoken agreement to seek privacy for the conversation. The distant clang of mechanics working on vehicles and generators provided background noise that would cover their words from casual eavesdroppers. You've been tracking this guy for months, Torres said, once they reached the relative seclusion behind a row of Humvees. This should be your mission. Caruso leaned against the hood of a vehicle, crossing his arms. Hayes has a point about the bigger picture. If this resurgence is as serious as Intel suggests, we need more skilled operators in the field. Still feels wrong. Torres shook his head. We were supposed to get this guy together. Now you'll get him without me, Caruso replied. I've seen you work. You know what to do. Torres looked skeptical. I've never led something this high profile before. Because you haven't had the chance, not because you can't do it. Caruso straightened, placing a hand on Torres's shoulder. Everything I know about hunting high-value targets I've shared with you. You've got this. What if I make the wrong call out there? Trust your gut, Caruso replied. Plans and protocols get you to the general vicinity. After that, it's instinct. Your instincts are solid, and I wouldn't say that if it wasn't true. Torres nodded slowly, drawing confidence from Caruso's faith in him. I've got 4 men for the operation. Sullivan, Wilson, Martinez, and Diaz. Good team. Sullivan has that sixth sense about ambushes. Yeah, he's saved my ass more than once. Torres attempted a smile. I'll send you a photo of the bastard's body when we get him. Caruso returned the smile, though neither expression reached their eyes. Both men understood the reality of their work, that no mission was guaranteed. The Kunduz sniper had evaded coalition forces for over a year because he was exceptional at his craft. Taking him down would require equal skill and a measure of luck. Just come back in one piece. Caruso said, I'm not breaking in a new drinking buddy at this stage of my career. You're not that old yet, Brooklyn. They fell into companionable silence, watching the activity of the base around them. After a moment, Torres checked his watch and offered his hand. I have to run, so I'll see you when I get back. Try not to terrorize the new guys too much at Kill School. Caruso gripped his friend's hand firmly, just enough to keep them alive. After Torres departed for his briefing, Caruso remained behind the motor pool, watching the dust devils that formed and dissipated across the compound. Despite his reassurances to Torres, an uneasy feeling had settled in his chest. He had hunted men across too many countries to count, and each target was different, but the process was fundamentally the same. The Kunduz sniper was unlike any of the others they had pursued. He wasn't merely skilled, he understood how they operated, anticipating their methods and using them against coalition forces. Going after him required a hunter of equal caliber. Torres was good, one of the best. But as Caruso made his way back to his quarters to prepare for tomorrow's departure, he couldn't shake the sense that he should be on that mission. Some targets demanded a specific kind of predator. Chapter 3. Sergeant Marcus Torres felt the weight of command as he led his four-man team through the narrow mud-walled alleys of Kunduz. The ancient Afghan city unfurled before them, its winding streets faintly illuminated in the pale moonlight. Adobe buildings crowded together like tired old men, their windows dark and shuttered against the night. The air hung heavy with the scent of chimney smoke and spices. 3 days into the hunt for the Kunduz sniper, Torres had already second-guessed himself a dozen times. His men maintained professional silence as they moved through the darkness, their footfalls like whispers against the packed dirt. But Torres felt the pressure of their expectations. Sullivan, Wilson, Martinez, and Diaz were all experienced operators who had placed their lives in his hands. Maintain tactical spacing, Torres whispered into his throat mic. Sullivan, take point at the next intersection. Staff Sergeant Danny Sullivan slipped past Torres with a silent nod, his athletic frame melting into the shadows ahead. Sullivan moved like a ghost, there one moment and then gone the next. A useful talent when hunting a phantom. The intelligence briefing had pinpointed this neighborhood as the sniper's most likely area of operation. Local assets reported seeing a man matching the description entering a building near the Eastern Market 2 nights ago. It wasn't much, but it was more than they'd had in months. Torres felt a vibration from his secure phone. The encrypted message from the talk confirmed what his instincts had been telling him all evening. Thermal drone shows a heat signature in the target building. Single occupant, 3rd floor, northeast corner. Moving to position Alpha, Torres informed his team. The team reconvened at the planned observation point, a half-collapsed building that offered sightlines to their target while providing adequate cover. Torres settled behind a section of crumbling wall, unslinging his pack with care. Sullivan appeared at his side, night vision goggles pushed up on his helmet. What's the call, Sarge? We going now or waiting for better light? Torres studied the darkened building across the narrow street. The structure stood 3 stories tall with a flat roof typical of the region. A perfect sniper's nest with multiple escape routes and excellent fields of fire covering the main thoroughfares. What would Dom do? The uninvited question rose in Torres's mind. He'd served with Caruso long enough to absorb his mentor's tactical philosophy. Sometimes, waiting for perfect conditions meant missing the window of opportunity entirely. We're going in tonight, Torres decided. If we wait until morning, civilians will complicate the approach. Right now, the streets are clear. Sullivan's expression revealed nothing, but he nodded once. Your call. How do you want to play it? Torres considered the options. The standard protocol called for surrounding the building, securing the ground floor, and methodically clearing each room while moving upward. But the Kunduz sniper had evaded capture for over a year by anticipating standard tactics. We split into 2 elements, Torres said, the plan crystallizing in his mind. Sullivan, you take Martinez and approach from the east. Diaz, Wilson, and I will circle around to the western entrance. We'll pincer him between our teams." "What about the roof?" Sullivan asked. "He's escaped through rooftop exits before." Torres gave him a tight smile. "That's why I'm sending you and Martinez to the adjacent building first. You'll set up overwatch on the roof while we begin our entry. If he tries to escape upward, you'll be waiting." Sullivan studied him for a long moment. "That's not standard procedure." "Neither is this sniper," Torres replied. "Besides, I learned from the best." The corner of Sullivan's mouth quirked upward. "Caruso would approve." "Let's hope so. Sync watches and move out in 5. As the team made final preparations, Torres felt the familiar tension that preceded combat. His mouth dried, and time seemed to slow, each second grinding by like gears without oil. He'd been in dozens of firefights and survived ambushes that should have killed him, but leading this operation felt different. The responsibility weighed heavily on him, like a metal band tightening around his chest. Torres checked his weapon one final time, an unconscious ritual performed thousands of times over his career. The M4's familiar contours anchored him in the moment, its weight an extension of himself. "Sullivan, you're clear to move," he whispered into his comm after the designated time had passed. Through his night vision, Torres watched Sullivan and Martinez bolt across the street, disappearing into the adjacent building without a sound. 3 minutes later, Sullivan's voice crackled in his earpiece. "In position on the roof. You've got a clear approach to the western entrance. No movement visible in the target building." "Copy that," Torres replied. "Moving now." Torres signaled to Wilson and Diaz, and the 3 men slipped from cover, crossing the open ground to the western side of the target building. The entrance was a simple wooden door, likely unlocked, given local customs. Torres tested the handle, confirming his assumption as the door swung inward with minimal resistance. The interior smelled of dust and urine. Many buildings in this part of Kunduz stood empty, their occupants having fled the fighting years ago. Torres led the way, his M4 up and ready as they cleared the ground floor room by room. Nothing but bare walls and occasional broken furniture. "Ground floor clear," he reported softly, moving to second level. The wooden stairs creaked despite their careful steps, each sound amplified in the empty building. Torres paused halfway up, listening for any response from above. Hearing nothing, he continued. The second floor proved as empty as the first. There were no signs of recent occupation, no indication that anyone had passed through in weeks. Torres felt the first stirrings of doubt. Had their intelligence been wrong? "Sullivan, confirm the position of the heat signature," he whispered. "Still showing one occupant, 3rd floor northeast corner," came the reply. "No movement." Torres smiled. Maybe they'd caught a break by catching the Kunduz sniper sleeping. He nodded to Wilson and Diaz, indicating that they should continue. The staircase to the 3rd floor was narrower, forcing them to ascend in a single file. Torres took point, hyper-aware of the vulnerability of their position. The 3rd floor had a different feel. The air was less stagnant, and the dust on the floor was disturbed by recent movement. Diaz tapped Torres's shoulder, pointing silently to a tripwire barely visible in the dim light. Torres froze, then carefully stepped over it, signaling the others to do the same. The sniper had set defensive measures. They were in the right place. The northeast corner room lay at the end of a short hallway. Torres approached with heightened caution, his senses straining for any sound from within. Sullivan's voice came through his earpiece, tense and controlled. "Movement on the roof. Target building, eastern edge. Can't get a clear shot." Torres made an instant decision. "Sullivan, maintain position. We're breaching now." He signaled a countdown to Wilson and Diaz. 3, 2, 1. Torres kicked in the door, sweeping the room with his weapon as he entered in a combat crouch. The space beyond was empty except for a small cot and a single lantern burning low on the floor. No sniper, no occupants. The realization came a half-second too late. "It's a trap," Torres shouted into his comm. "Sullivan, get—" The world erupted in fire and thunder. The floor beneath Torres seemed to lift and shatter all at once as multiple explosions rocked the building. He was airborne for a terrible, weightless moment before crashing down amid splintered wood and pulverized concrete. Pain blossomed across his entire body, but training took over. Torres tried to push himself upright, reaching for his weapon. His arms wouldn't respond properly. Something warm and wet soaked his uniform. "Sullivan!" he gasped into his throat mic. "Status!" No response came through the ringing in his ears. Torres managed to roll onto his back, staring up at the stars now visible through the gaping hole in the building's roof. The beauty of the night sky seemed out of place against the surrounding chaos. He heard gunfire with sharp, controlled bursts, which told him at least some of his team were still fighting. Torres tried again to reach for his weapon, but his limbs felt disconnected from his body. Cold began seeping into his extremities, a numbness that spread with alarming speed. A figure appeared in what remained of the doorway, silhouetted against flames, beginning to lick up the stairwell. Not one of his men. The stance was wrong, and the weapon profile was unfamiliar. The Kunduz sniper had been waiting for them after all. The figure approached, stepping carefully through the debris until he stood over Torres. The man was of average height and build, unremarkable, except for the cold resolve in his eyes. He carried a Dragunov rifle slung across his back and a pistol in his hand. "You Americans are so predictable," the man said in accented English. "Always the same approaches, the same tactics." Torres tried to speak, but only a wet cough emerged. The metallic taste of blood filled his mouth. The sniper crouched beside him, studying Torres's face. "When will your people learn? I'll kill legions of Americans before you capture me." "Caruso, find you," Torres managed. "Perhaps this Caruso will find me," the sniper agreed, rising to his feet. "But you won't be alive to see it." The last thing Marcus Torres saw was the muzzle flash as the sniper fired twice into his chest. His last thought was of Dominic Caruso and what he would have done differently. Chapter 4. Caruso slammed his fist into the shipping container with such force that the metal rang like a bell, reverberating across the quiet corner of FOB Fenty. Blood smeared the corrugated surface where his knuckles had split open, but he barely registered the pain. It paled in comparison to the crushing weight in his chest. Damn it, he didn't deserve that. The words hung in the dry Afghan air, refusing to dissolve or become any less brutal with repetition. Captain Hayes had delivered the news an hour ago, his face grave, as he described how Taliban fighters had displayed Torres's body and Wilson's in the Kunduz marketplace as trophies. Sullivan and Martinez had managed to escape with wounds, but were stable at the NATO hospital in Bagram. Diaz was in critical condition, undergoing life-saving surgery after being pulled from the rubble by para-rescuemen. Caruso braced his forearms against the container and dropped his head between his shoulders, drawing ragged breaths that tasted of dust and diesel. The compound buzzed with the usual morning activity, with vehicles rumbling past, soldiers calling to one another, and the distant thump of helicopter rotors. But it all seemed muted, as if heard while underwater. A lone figure approached, skirting the motor pool with deliberate steps. Rodriguez maintained a respectful distance, waiting for acknowledgement before speaking. "Heard about Torres," he said simply. Caruso straightened, flexing his bloody knuckles. "Wilson too, and Diaz might not make it." Rodriguez said nothing more, leaning against the container beside Caruso. His silent presence offered more comfort than words could have. "I should have been there," Caruso finally said, his Brooklyn accent thickening with emotion. "If I'd been on that mission." "Maybe you'd be where Wilson is now," Rodriguez cut in. "Maybe not, no way to know." Caruso turned to face him, eyes burning with raw intensity. "I'm going after him." "The Kunduz sniper?" "Who else? He set that trap. He knew they were coming." Caruso paced the small area between containers with barely contained fury. "I know how this son of a bitch thinks. I've studied every hit he's made for the past year. I can find him." "Hayes won't authorize it," Rodriguez warned. "Not after losing Torres and Wilson. Not with Diaz hanging by a thread." "I don't need Hayes' authorization." Caruso stopped pacing, his decision crystallizing. "He wants me to train, so I'll conduct a masterclass on one soldier killing snipers up in Kunduz." Rodriguez pushed off from the container, closing the distance between them. "You're talking about going solo to hunt a ghost through Taliban territory. That's suicide, and you know it." "I'm not asking you to come." "The hell you're not," Rodriguez replied, holding Caruso's gaze. "That's exactly what you're doing. Not in words, but still asking." The accusation landed square, forcing Caruso to confront the truth of it. He was asking, without asking. Because a one-man hunt through enemy territory was indeed suicide, but two elite operators together stood a chance. "Torres was my friend too," Rodriguez added quietly, "but getting yourself killed won't bring him back." Caruso turned away, staring across the base toward the mountains. Somewhere beyond those peaks, the man who killed Torres was likely already setting his next trap, convinced of his invincibility. "I made him a promise," Caruso said, voice low and rough. "Last time we drank together, we swore if anything happened to either of us, the other would make it right. I can't let this go. Rodriguez sighed. Give me an hour to grab my gear. If we leave now, we might catch a supply run heading north. You don't have to do this. Yeah, I do. Rodriguez clapped him once on the shoulder. Besides, someone has to keep your crazy ass from getting shot. An hour later, Caruso stood at the edge of the tarmac, his backpack loaded with enough supplies for 3 days in the field. He'd changed into his operational gear, lightweight plate carrier over a combat shirt and tactical pants bloused over desert boots. A baseball cap with the brim pulled low concealed his features from casual observation. Rodriguez approached from the direction of the armory, similarly equipped. They exchanged nods, but no words as they moved toward a CH-47 Chinook being loaded with supplies bound for smaller outposts in the north. They had covered half the distance to the helicopter when a voice cut through the background noise of the airfield. Going somewhere, Sergeant Caruso? Captain Hayes stood blocking their path, arms crossed over his chest, his expression unreadable. 2 armed MPs flanked him, hands resting casually on their holstered sidearms. Caruso halted, instinctively shifting his weight to a fighting stance before catching himself. Getting some air, sir. With full combat load and heading toward a transport bound for Kunduz province, Hayes raised an eyebrow. Try again. The moment stretched taut, like a tripwire. Caruso measured the distance to the helicopter, calculating whether they could make it before being physically restrained. Hayes seemed to read his thoughts. Stand down, Sergeant, he said, voice low but carrying the full weight of command. That's an order. The authority in Hayes' tone triggered years of military conditioning. Caruso remained motionless, caught between discipline and rage. Sir, he began, his voice tight. Torres was your friend. I know. Hayes uncrossed his arms, his stance softening slightly. He was also a soldier who understood the risks. As do you. The Kunduz sniper is still out there, and he'll be dealt with, Hayes replied. But not by you. Not now. Caruso felt his control slipping, the grief he'd been suppressing threatening to overflow into dangerous territory. With all due respect, sir, that's bullshit. Torres deserves better than to be another name on a memorial wall while his killer walks free. Wilson, too. Hayes gestured for the MPs to step back, then moved closer to Caruso, lowering his voice. You think I don't understand. I've lost men under my command before. Good men, each one feels like a personal failure. Then let me go after him, Caruso urged. Me and Rodriguez. Small footprint, no official connection to command. If we succeed, problem solved. If you fail, we lose 2 more of our best operators, Hayes interrupted sharply. Caruso shook his head. This isn't just any Taliban fighter. The Kunduz sniper has tactical training, maybe even a formal military background. He's killed dozens of coalition troops. He needs to be stopped. And he will be, Hayes assured him. But not at the cost of more lives thrown away in blind vengeance. Rodriguez, who had remained silent throughout the exchange, finally spoke. Sir, we can do this. We're not going in blind. Hayes turned his attention to Rodriguez. I expected better from you, Sergeant. Return to your quarters immediately. Consider yourself confined to base until further notice. Rodriguez looked to Caruso, hesitating. Go, Caruso said quietly. This isn't your fight. After Rodriguez reluctantly departed, Hayes motioned for Caruso to follow him away from the tarmac toward a quieter area near the perimeter fence. They walked in tense silence until they were beyond earshot of others. You were ready to throw away your career, Hayes said, not as an accusation, but as a statement of fact. Over a decade of service, all your training, your reputation, all of it gone in one impulsive decision. Some things matter more than careers, Caruso replied. Hayes studied him for a long moment. You really believe you're the only one who can get him, don't you? I know how he thinks. I've tracked his methodology since he first appeared. If anyone has a chance, it's me. And that's exactly why I can't let you go, Hayes said, surprising Caruso with his candor. We're facing a Taliban resurgence across multiple provinces. Intelligence shows they're rebuilding networks, reestablishing control in areas we thought were secure. The Kunduz sniper is just one symptom of a much larger problem. Caruso started to object, but Hayes raised a hand to silence him. What happens when we neutralize this sniper? Another takes his place, and another after that. We're fighting an insurgency that's learning and adapting to our methods. They study us, just as we study them. So we just let Torres's killer walk? Caruso couldn't keep the bitterness from his voice. No, Hayes replied with unexpected intensity. My solution is to build a force that can counter not just this threat, but all those that follow. That's why I'm sending you to the kill school. We need you to create hunters who can match and exceed the enemy's capabilities." Caruso turned away, gazing at the distant mountains. The logic was sound, but it did nothing to ease the burning need for immediate action. Training took months, while Torres's killer remained free. "I should at least see Sullivan and Martinez," Caruso said, his voice softer now. "Hear what happened firsthand." "You will," Hayes nodded. "They're being transferred back here once they're cleared from Bagram. Sullivan's injuries were minor, so he'll be back on duty within a week. Martinez took some shrapnel, but nothing critical. And Diaz?" Hayes' expression darkened. "Touch and go. Multiple surgeries ahead. If he survives, his fighting days are probably over." Caruso absorbed this information, each detail another coal in the fire of his determination. "You're asking me to set aside a blood oath," Caruso said quietly. "I'm asking you to fulfill it more effectively," Hayes countered. "Think about what Torres would want. One sniper taken down at the cost of your life, or dozens of operators trained to hunt and eliminate threats across the theater." The question struck home, forcing Caruso to confront the larger strategic picture beyond his personal grief. Torres had understood duty. He'd lived it daily. What would he say if he were here? Caruso drew a deep breath, the air filling his lungs with the familiar dusty tang of Afghanistan. When he finally spoke, his voice was steadier. "When does the next class start at the kill school?" Hayes' expression relaxed. 3 days. "And the Kunduz sniper?" "Will be handled," Hayes assured him. "I've already authorized a specialized task force. Rodriguez will be part of it, along with additional assets. Martinez will also join once he's cleared for duty." "What about Sullivan? He saw him?" Caruso inquired. "He'll be one of your kill team trainees." Caruso weighed this information, searching for deception in Hayes' expression, but finding none. The captain was being straight with him, offering a compromise that served both the mission and Caruso's need for justice. "I want regular updates on the hunt," Caruso said finally, "and I want annihilating the Kunduz sniper to be the capstone mission for my trainees. If we train to face him, we'll have the most lethal class that's ever graduated from kill school." Hayes nodded. "I have no problem with that." The tension between them eased, not disappearing entirely, but transforming into something workable. Caruso wouldn't abandon his promise to Torres, but he would approach it from a different angle. "I should check on Rodriguez," Caruso said, already turning to leave. "One more thing, Sergeant," Hayes called after him. "I meant what I said about you being one of the best. Don't make me regret trusting you with this." Caruso paused, but didn't look back. "You won't, sir." As he walked away, the weight of Torres's death remained, a dense mass in his chest that made each breath an effort. But alongside it grew something else, a cold determination that transcended simple vengeance. If he couldn't hunt the Kunduz sniper himself, he would create warriors so skilled, so lethal, that no enemy could escape them. In the meantime, he would instruct others in kill school while planning his own eventual reckoning. Because whatever Hayes believed, whatever logic dictated, Caruso knew with absolute certainty that someday, somehow, he would stand face to face with the Kunduz sniper. And when that day came, there would be nothing in the world capable of stopping him from standing over his lifeless body, fallen by Caruso's hand. Chapter 5. The memorial service for Sergeant Marcus Torres took place at dawn when the Afghan mountains were still shrouded in mist. A row of combat boots, helmets, and rifles formed a somber line on the dusty parade ground of FOB Fenty. Each set represented a fallen warrior, with Torres's gear positioned at the center. American flags hung limp in the still morning air as soldiers gathered in formation, their faces solemn beneath the growing light. Caruso stood at attention, his eyes fixed on Torres' empty boots. The polished leather gleamed under the rising sun, a stark contrast to the fine dust that settled over everything in this desolate landscape. He tried to reconcile these pristine boots with memories of Torres stomping through Iraqi mud, Afghan snow, and countless battlefields across their shared decade of war. Captain Hayes delivered a brief eulogy, and then the formation held a moment of silence. In that stillness, Caruso silently renewed his vow. The Kunduz sniper would pay for Torres's death, even if Caruso had to pursue him to the gates of hell itself. After the ceremony, soldiers dispersed to their duties, the rhythm of military life continuing, despite the hollow space left by Torres's absence. Caruso lingered at the memorial, waiting until he was alone before approaching the display. He kneeled beside Torres's boots, running his fingers along the worn edge of a tactical vest they'd shared during their early days in the Ranger Regiment. It still bore the faint mark where Torres had repaired a tear following a night raid in Fallujah. "You deserve better than this," Caruso whispered, throat tight with emotion no training could suppress. "But I'll make it right. That's a promise." A shadow fell across the memorial. Caruso looked up to find Staff Sergeant Danny Sullivan standing nearby, his right arm in a sling and a cut visible along his jawline. Sullivan's usually confident posture was diminished by grief and injury. "Should you be out of the hospital?" Caruso asked, rising to his feet. Sullivan shrugged his good shoulder. "Got cleared this morning. The sling is just precautionary until the local medics clear me." They stood in silence for a moment, both men staring at Torres's gear. Sullivan shifted uncomfortably, guilt etched into the lines of his face. "It was my fault," he finally said. "I should have recognized the trap." "Torres made the call to breach," Caruso replied. "You followed orders." "It wasn't enough. After the blast, I was separated from my M4 and—" Sullivan's voice trailed off, the memory visibly painful. "Did you see his face?" Caruso asked, his tone sharpening with focus. "The Kunduz sniper, did you get a look at him?" Sullivan nodded. "Average height, lean build, nothing remarkable except his eyes." He paused. They were cold and calculating. "Any distinguishing features? Scars, tattoos?" "Nothing obvious, but I did hear him speak. He spoke English, but his accent was unique. Not fully Afghan. Maybe some European education." Sullivan's fist clenched at his side. He wanted Torres to know who killed him, said Americans were predictable, that our tactics never changed. Caruso absorbed these details, filing them alongside the patterns he'd already identified from the sniper's previous attacks. Each piece of information was another link in the chain that would eventually lead him to his target. "You disappointed you're not joining the hunt for him?" Caruso asked. Sullivan shrugged. "I get why they'd send me to kill school, but it seems like your skills would be better suited somewhere else." "Just following orders," Caruso replied, the words tasting bitter in his mouth. Sullivan smartly chose not to press. "When does class start?" "Tomorrow. I've got 3 additional NCOs to transform into lethal tools of the Delta Force kill team. Sergeants Cooper, Feldman, and Ryder. Anyone good?" "We'll find out," Caruso said. Hayes mentioned he has high hopes for Staff Sergeant James Ryder. Sullivan's expression flickered with interest. "Ranger Regiment. Former Ranger, current Delta. Hayes said he's technically perfect but needs seasoning." "Perfect doesn't exist in combat," Sullivan said, echoing one of Caruso's frequent lessons. "Exactly why he's in my class," Caruso confirmed. "They want me to burn away the textbook and build something deadlier." The conversation lulled as a transport helicopter thundered overhead, momentarily drowning out all other sounds. When the roar subsided, Sullivan gestured toward the administrative building. "I should report in. They're expecting me at the talk for a full mission debrief." "I'll walk with you," Caruso offered. "I need to meet the rest of my class anyway." They crossed the compound side by side, navigating through the organized chaos of a fully operational combat outpost. Vehicles rumbled past, and the distinctive clang of equipment being unloaded from supply trucks provided a constant background rhythm. The Tactical Operations Center was situated in a reinforced concrete building near the center of the base. Inside, the temperature dropped noticeably, powerful air conditioning units fighting against the electronics-generated heat. Computer screens lined the walls, displaying satellite imagery, troop movements, and intelligence summaries that shaped the ongoing war effort. Captain Hayes stood at a central table, reviewing documents with a small group of officers and NCOs. He looked up as Caruso and Sullivan entered, dismissing the others with a nod before approaching. "Sullivan, good to have you back," Hayes said, shaking the staff sergeant's hand. "Report to Lieutenant Novak for your onboarding debrief in 5. Sullivan acknowledged the order and departed with a final glance at Caruso. Once he was gone, Hayes turned his full attention to the Brooklyn-born operator. "Your new team is waiting in the training room," he said without preamble. "I've pulled their complete files for your review." Hayes handed over 4 manila folders, each bearing a name and service photo. Caruso took them, immediately flipping open the top file to reveal Staff Sergeant James Ryder's personnel record. The photo showed a square-jawed man with closely cropped brown hair and intense green eyes who seemed to evaluate the camera with professional detachment. His service record was impressive. He had multiple combat deployments with Ranger regiments before selection to Delta Force, extensive specialized training in close-quarters combat, and urban warfare. "I see why Sergeant Ryder caught your eye. He looks solid on paper," Caruso commented, scanning through commendations and qualification scores. "What's his weakness?" Always goes by the book, Hayes replied. Flawless execution when everything goes as planned, but lacks creative problem solving when missions go sideways. Caruso nodded, turning to the next file, Sergeant John Cooper. The photo revealed a broad-shouldered soldier with a neatly trimmed beard and watchful eyes. His record showed strong performance in conventional infantry roles before transitioning to special operations. Cooper's a spotter for our sniper section, Hayes explained. Excellent marksmanship and good tactical awareness, but sometimes overthinks in high-pressure situations. The third file belonged to Sergeant David Feldman, a lean, intellectual-looking soldier whose background in military intelligence had preceded his selection to operational roles. His psychological profile indicated exceptional analytical abilities, but noted potential hesitation during direct combat. Language specialist? Caruso asked, spotting Feldman's linguistic qualifications in Pashto, Dari, and Urdu. Among other talents, Hayes confirmed. He can break down pattern analysis like nobody's business, but needs work on aggressive action. The final file contained information on Staff Sergeant Danny Sullivan, whom Caruso had just spoken with. His credentials were already familiar, but Caruso reviewed them again with fresh eyes, considering how Sullivan's direct experience with the Kunduz sniper might influence the training program. Interesting combination, Caruso said, closing the folders. Why these four specifically? Hayes leaned against the nearby table, lowering his voice slightly. Because they complement each other's strengths and weaknesses. But more importantly, because they're all capable of the kind of adaptation we need against this Taliban resurgence. And because Sullivan has seen the Kunduz sniper up close, Caruso added. Hayes didn't deny it. His experience will be valuable to the others. Caruso's jaw tightened as the reality solidified before him. Hayes wasn't just assigning him to train random operators. He was building a specialized team with a specific target in mind. The realization brought a cold clarity to Caruso's purpose. You're creating a kill team for the Kunduz sniper. I'm creating a kill team that can handle any high-value target, Hayes corrected carefully, including the Kunduz sniper when the time comes. The implication hung between them, unspoken but understood. Hayes was offering Caruso a path to fulfilling his promise to Torres, but only after proper preparation. It wasn't the immediate action Caruso craved, but it was a concession perhaps the only one a man in Hayes' position could make. When do I meet them? Caruso asked, accepting the unspoken arrangement. Hayes checked his watch. They've been waiting for 30 minutes. I told them their instructor would arrive when he decided they were worth his time. Despite everything, Caruso felt the corner of his mouth twitch upward. Then I suppose I shouldn't keep them waiting much longer, Caruso said, tucking the folders under his arm. The training room was located in a separate building adjacent to the talk. Caruso paused at the doorway, studying the men who would become his responsibility. Ryder sat with perfect military posture, his expression neutral. Cooper cleaned his fingernails with a tactical knife, seemingly relaxed, but alert. Feldman reviewed notes in a small notebook, his eyes moving rapidly across the pages. Sullivan stared at the tabletop, still processing his recent trauma. Caruso drew a deep breath, settling the weight of his new purpose across his shoulders. These men were now his to shape, to forge into weapons capable of delivering the justice Torres deserved. He'd transform them into army assassins who would become the best of the best on the Delta Force kill team that even the Kunduz sniper couldn't evade. With that resolve firming his steps, Sergeant Dominic Caruso entered the room to meet his new kill team. Chapter 6. Pre-dawn darkness held FOB Fenty in a stillness, pierced only by the distant whine of generators and the barked commands of night shift soldiers. Caruso surveyed the obstacle course he'd designed, its unforgiving features barely visible in the dim light. Mud pits, cargo nets, and concrete barriers would soon become the battlefield where his trainees would push themselves beyond their typical limits. Caruso checked his watch. 5 minutes until his team arrived for their first true day of training. 5 minutes to center himself for what lay ahead. The eastern sky had just begun to lighten when 4 figures emerged from the barracks area. They moved with the unconscious coordination of men accustomed to operating as a unit despite having trained together for less than a day. Right on time, Caruso muttered. As they approached, Caruso assessed each of the men. Staff Sergeant James Ryder led the group, his muscular frame gliding toward the course, his eyes vigilant. The green-eyed Army Ranger maintained the composed demeanor of a seasoned soldier, but Caruso detected the evaluation in his gaze as Ryder scanned the obstacles. Behind him, Staff Sergeant Danny Sullivan moved with the slight favoring of his recently injured arm. Sergeant John Cooper walked with the confidence of a man comfortable in his physical capabilities, and his eyes constantly sweeping the surroundings. Sergeant David Feldman brought up the rear, his lean frame moving with economical steps, his dark eyes analyzing every detail. "Gentlemen," Caruso greeted them, "welcome to Kill School. Today marks the first step in your transformation." The men stood at parade rest as Caruso moved along their line. "You were all selected because someone believes you have what it takes to become elite manhunters. I'm not yet convinced." He stopped directly in front of Ryder. "Many men with impressive records like yours have washed out of my training. What separates the best from the rest is adaptability, creativity, and the willingness to cross lines when necessary." Caruso stepped back. "Today, we assess your baseline. This course is designed to push you beyond your comfort zone. You'll run it until you can't stand, then run it again." He saw the subtle tightening of Cooper's jaw and the slight narrowing of Sullivan's eyes. "After completing your final run, you'll proceed to the firing range for weapons assessment. Questions?" The men remained silent. "Begin." For the next 6 hours, Caruso drove his team through an unrelenting cycle of physical challenges. They attacked the obstacle course as the Afghan sun climbed higher, baking the earth beneath them. Ryder moved with textbook precision, his technique flawless, but lacking improvisation. Cooper's physical strength carried him through the challenges, though his movements grew mechanical as fatigue set in. Feldman lagged in pure physical tests but showed remarkable adaptation. Sullivan pushed through with grim determination, his recent injuries clearly causing pain he refused to acknowledge. By midday, all 4 men were exhausted, their uniforms soaked with sweat and caked with mud. Yet none had quit or asked for a break, a testament to their physical and mental resilience. "Clear the course and hydrate," Caruso ordered. "Weapons assessment begins in 10 minutes. As they trudged toward the water station, Caruso caught snippets of conversation. "Think this is bad," Sullivan was saying. "You should have seen what he put us through in Fallujah." "Does he ever run the course himself?" Feldman asked, breathing still labored. Sullivan snorted. "Only when he wants to show you how badly you're performing." At the firing range, Caruso assessed each man's proficiency. All demonstrated a high level of marksmanship required for the Delta Force kill team, although Cooper distinguished himself with exceptional long-range accuracy. After hours of drills, Caruso finally called an end to the day's training. "You guys didn't suck too bad today," Caruso told them. "Formation at 0500 tomorrow. Be ready for something different." As the team moved away, Caruso heard Feldman mutter, "Something different probably means worse." Sullivan just laughed. "You have no idea." The following morning, instead of directing them to the obstacle course, Caruso led them to a nondescript concrete building where a secure briefing room awaited. The men exchanged puzzled glances as they filed inside. The room contained a simple table with 5 chairs, a digital projector, and a map of Afghanistan's eastern provinces. "Take a seat," Caruso instructed, closing the door. Once they were settled, Caruso activated the projector, displaying an aerial photograph of a small village. "Gentlemen, training is over for today. You're going operational." The sudden shift brought all 4 men to immediate attention. "This is Nangalam village, 20 kilometers east of Jalalabad," Caruso continued. "Intel indicates a local man is acting as a courier, transporting coalition troop movements purchased from an Afghan trader. The information is being transported today to Taliban leadership in the mountains." He tapped a finger on the village center. "Your mission is to intercept the courier and recover the intelligence without alerting enemy forces that we've compromised their source. The courier must be captured, not killed, with minimal disruption to the village." Cooper raised his hand slightly. "Parameters for engagement, Sergeant." "Non-lethal," Caruso replied. "Don't kill him. Don't get killed." Feldman leaned forward. "Timeline. The courier is expected to make contact with his handler at approximately 1100 hours. Transport leaves in 30 minutes. "Description of the target?" Ryder asked. Caruso saw the opportunity to test Ryder's thirst for perfection. A male who often wears a blue camise. He typically carries a worn leather satchel. "Not much of a description," Ryder growled. Caruso tilted his head as he glared at the trainee. "Is that going to be a problem, Sergeant Ryder?" "No problem at all." "Command structure for this op?" Sullivan asked. "Who do you all think should lead?" Cooper, Sullivan, and Feldman pointed to Ryder. "Okay, Ryder has tactical lead," Caruso announced. "Sullivan as second. I'll observe, but will not intervene unless absolutely necessary." "Questions?" Caruso asked after explaining the weapons and equipment loadout. The men exchanged glances, processing the unexpected mission. Gear up, move out in 20. 90 minutes later, their unmarked vehicle approached Nangalam village. The town spread across a shallow valley with mud brick buildings and narrow streets filled with the everyday activities of rural Afghan life. From their observation point, Ryder assessed the terrain through binoculars. The main thoroughfare runs north to south. The market area is concentrated in the center, 3 entry points, all with civilian traffic. Sullivan pointed to a cluster of buildings near the western edge. That area provides the best observation point for the market with multiple exit routes. Ryder nodded. Feldman, establish position there with Cooper. Sullivan and I will circulate through the market to identify the target. Comms check once in position. The men separated, moving toward their designated locations, their local attire allowing them to blend with scattered foot traffic. Caruso followed at a distance, observing but not interfering. Feldman and Cooper secured a position with clear sightlines to the market. Sullivan and Ryder began a casual sweep of the area, eyes scanning for the courier. Eyes on possible target, Sullivan's voice crackled 30 minutes later. A young male, no more than 18, wearing a blue camise, approaching the well. He's carrying a leather satchel. The boy matches the description, Cooper responded. Ryder's voice remained calm. Sullivan, continue normal patrol. I'll intercept at the eastern alley. Feldman, maintain overwatch. Caruso watched as Ryder altered his course to intersect with the teenager's path. The boy wove through the crowd with the ease of someone who knew every corner of the village. Just as Ryder was about to make contact, the boy suddenly stopped, his head turning sharply. Target is spooked, Feldman warned. The boy's eyes widened as they locked onto Sullivan. Recognition flashed across the courier's face, not of Sullivan personally, but of the threat he represented. We have a runner, Cooper reported as the teenager bolted, darting between market stalls and startled villagers. All elements converge, Ryder commanded, immediately giving chase. Cooper, track from above. Direct us. Caruso observed as his team scrambled to recover from the compromised approach. The boy moved with the natural agility of youth and desperate speed, ducking through narrow alleys, vaulting low walls, and using the crowded market to break the line of sight. Target turning north, cutting through the butcher's yard, heading toward the eastern well, Cooper directed. Ryder cut through a building to intercept rather than following directly. Sullivan circled wide to cut off potential escape routes, while Feldman descended to join the pursuit. The teenager burst from an alley, nearly colliding with a group of women carrying water. He spun to change direction and found himself facing Ryder. The boy pivoted again, only to find Sullivan blocking his path. For a moment, it seemed the chase was over. Then the courier made a desperate move, diving through the narrow space between 2 vendor stalls and sprinting toward the edge of the village. He's heading for the canal, Cooper called out. If he makes it to the eastern fields, we'll lose him. Feldman appeared ahead of the boy, moving to cut him off, but misjudged the teenager's speed. The courier slipped past, shoulder-clipping Feldman, and sending him stumbling into a stack of clay pots that shattered loudly on impact. The noise drew attention from nearby villagers. Ryder made a quick decision. Sullivan, fall back and establish presence at the south exit. Cooper, maintain overwatch. Feldman, circle around to cover a canal crossing. I'm continuing the pursuit. Caruso crossed his arms and shook his head as he watched 3 elite soldiers chase a boy through a small village like a greased pig. The chase continued through the eastern edge of the village, the boy's stamina beginning to wane as Ryder steadily closed the distance. As they approached the shallow floodplain that marked the village boundary, the teenager stumbled slightly on the uneven ground. That moment of hesitation was enough. Ryder lunged forward, tackling the boy with controlled force. They went down in the soft earth, partially concealed from the village by scrubby trees. The courier struggled fiercely, but Ryder quickly secured his wrists, whispering harshly in Pashto, "Be still if you want to live." Target secured, Ryder reported through comms. Caruso watched as his team extracted the courier and themselves from the village, maintaining their cover while securing their captured target. The boy remained silent, his eyes wide with fear, yet smart enough not to cry out. By the time they reached the vehicle, Caruso had to acknowledge the successful completion of the mission. Despite the complications, the leather satchel contained exactly what intelligence had indicated: detailed coalition troop movements, patrol schedules, and base security protocols. Information that would have cost American lives if it had reached Taliban leadership. Back at the FOB, after transferring the courier to intelligence personnel for questioning, Caruso gathered his team in the same room where the mission had begun. You caught the courier and secured the intel, he acknowledged, his tone neutral. This was a real mission, but also a test. The men remained silent, recognizing that Caruso's assessment wasn't finished. However, he continued, that little boy gave all you big badass army guys a run for your money. I observed significant weaknesses in your performance as a team. He turned to Sullivan. You were overeager, and your angle of ambush too direct, allowing the target to identify you as a threat. Feldman, your response was too slow, and for crying out loud, son, hit the weights. That skinny-ass boy knocked you out of the chase. Cooper, your Overwatch communications were accurate, but they lacked the predictive element needed to anticipate the target's movements. Don't tell us where he's at. Tell us where he's going. Finally, he turned to Ryder. Your tactical plan was sound until it wasn't. You didn't plan for a scenario where the kid would run and relied on your physical ability to save the mission. Don't plan more. React better. The men absorbed the criticism without protest. Tomorrow, Caruso concluded, we address these weaknesses. This time at 0400. Dismissed. As the team filed out, Caruso remained behind, reviewing his notes from the operation. They had succeeded, but the mission had revealed exactly what he'd suspected. The kill team trainees weren't ready to face a target like the Kunduz sniper. Caruso closed his notebook, determination hardening his resolve. He had promised Torres justice, and that meant transforming these men into something beyond what conventional training could produce. They needed to become extensions of his own lethal capability, with the added perspectives and skills each brought to the team. Tomorrow would be harder, much harder. Chapter 7. The acrid stench of diesel fumes and engine exhaust hung over FOB Fenty as Dominic Caruso watched his team struggle through the second hour of the exercise. Transport vehicles rumbled past, carrying teams out for pre-dawn missions, their headlights cutting yellow swaths through the darkness. In the distance, temporary spotlights powered by finicky generators cast harsh shadows across the compound, while mechanics cursed and metal clanged as they worked to restore power to the mess hall. The persistent hammering provided a relentless soundtrack to the punishment Caruso inflicted on his men, who had been at it since 0400, long before the base stirred to life. Faster, Cooper! Caruso shouted as the broad-shouldered sergeant faltered on his 9th consecutive trip through the mud pit. The enemy won't wait while you catch your breath. Cooper pushed forward, his muscular frame visibly trembling with exhaustion, as he hauled himself through the thick, sucking mud. Behind him, Feldman's lean form had slowed to a mechanical crawl, each movement a battle against his body's demand to quit. Even Sullivan and Ryder, the most physically resilient of the group, showed signs of reaching their limits. You think you're tired now? Caruso paced alongside them. Imagine being in pursuit of a high-value target through mountain terrain after 3 days without sleep. That's when your real training kicks in. None of the men responded. They had learned quickly that conserving breath was essential to surviving Caruso's brutal regimen. 2 days had passed since the Nangalam village operation. 2 days of intensified training that pushed beyond conventional military standards into something more primal. Caruso had dissected every failure from the courier mission and designed exercises targeted explicitly at each weakness he'd identified. Time, Caruso called as the first rays of sunlight crested the eastern ridge. Recovery position. The 4 men collapsed where they stood, dropping to their backs with arms and legs extended. Their chests heaved as they gulped the thin mountain air. 5 minutes, Caruso announced. Then we move on to Phase 2. Sergeant Rodriguez approached from the direction of the operations center, a quizzical expression visible even in the dim light. He stood beside Caruso, watching the exhausted operators. This seems excessive, Rodriguez said quietly, even for you. Caruso didn't respond immediately, his eyes fixed on his team as they struggled to recover. These men need to be broken before they can be rebuilt, he finally replied. Torres died because his team wasn't prepared for what they faced. Rodriguez shook his head. Torres died because the Kunduz sniper is an operator who knows our playbook as well as we do. No amount of physical punishment will change that. This isn't just physical, Caruso countered. It's about mental adaptation, learning to function when every instinct screams for surrender. And what happens when you push them beyond their breaking point? Then they shouldn't be here. Rodriguez studied his friend's profile, noting the rigid set of his jaw and the shadows beneath his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights. This isn't just about training them, Rodriguez observed. You're punishing yourself, channeling your grief into their suffering. Caruso turned sharply. If you got something to say it directly. Torres wouldn't want this, Rodriguez said plainly. He believed in building men up to be their best, not grinding them down. Remember Kabul, the warehouse district? The memory surfaced immediately in Caruso's mind. Torres leading a training session with raw Afghan National Army commandos, patiently demonstrating techniques, encouraging progress rather than punishing failure. Different situation, Caruso muttered, but the certainty had left his voice. Different methods, same goal, Rodriguez countered. Torres got results without breaking spirits. Caruso was saved from responding by the end of the 5-minute rest period. He moved toward his team, who were already forcing themselves back to their feet with grim determination. Change of plans, he announced. Grab your gear and meet at the firing range in 15 minutes. Full combat load. As the men trudged toward the barracks, Rodriguez placed a hand on Caruso's shoulder. Just remember why you're doing this, he said. Is it for them, for the mission, or your own redemption? Rodriguez walked away before Caruso could answer, leaving him alone with a question that cut too close to the truth. The firing range crackled with controlled bursts of gunfire as Caruso's team rotated through a series of increasingly complex scenarios. Unlike the previous day's exercises, today's drills focused on tactical decision-making rather than pure marksmanship. Identify, prioritize, neutralize, Caruso called as targets sprang up in unpredictable patterns. Every millisecond counts. Ryder executed each element of the course flawlessly, his bullets striking center mass with machine-like precision that came from countless hours of repetitive training. Yet Caruso noted how Ryder's movements never deviated from protocol, his technical perfection leaving no space for the creative adaptability that often made the difference in the field. Stop, Caruso ordered as Ryder completed the sequence. Everyone gather round. The team assembled, weapons held at the ready position. Ryder, Caruso said, your shots are perfect, but you move like you're expecting the world to follow your rulebook. A muscle twitched in Ryder's jaw, but he remained silent. Our enemies don't play by our rules, Caruso pressed. They watch for patterns and strike when we become predictable. He glanced at the rest of the team. Sullivan, show them the Bensonhurst technique on this next round. Sullivan gave a quick nod, instantly catching Caruso's meaning. When the targets appeared, he moved unpredictably, crouching and shooting from positions that defied conventional wisdom but offered superior cover and lines of fire. This, Caruso said as Sullivan completed the run, is what keeps you alive out there. This is how you avoid becoming just another name carved in stone. The words hung heavy in the air. Even Ryder, typically stoic, seemed to absorb their weight. Cooper, Feldman, Caruso continued, you're up next. Show me something I haven't seen before. As the morning progressed, Caruso noted subtle shifts in each man's approach. Ryder began incorporating unconventional movements into his routine. Cooper utilized his strength to maintain stable firing positions in awkward stances. Feldman, despite his physical limitations, displayed remarkable spatial awareness, anticipating target patterns before they appeared. By midday, exhaustion had given way to focused intensity. The team moved with growing cohesion, communicating through subtle gestures and shared understanding rather than explicit commands. When Caruso finally called an end to the exercise, the improvement was undeniable. Better, he acknowledged. Not good enough yet, but better. He checked his watch. Ciao. Then classroom at 1400. We've got intel to review. The classroom was a repurposed storage container, its interior walls covered with maps, intelligence reports, and surveillance photos. The team settled into folding chairs as Caruso closed the door behind them. What I'm about to share is classified at the highest level, he began. This information doesn't leave this room. He activated a projector, displaying a grainy photograph of a man in traditional Afghan clothing, face partially obscured by a pakol hat. This is the only confirmed image we have of the Kunduz sniper. The room fell silent as the operator studied the photograph. Taken 3 months ago by a surveillance drone, Caruso continued. Moments after, he eliminated a British SAS operator from approximately 800 meters. He cycled through additional images, bullet impact sites, structural diagrams of buildings used as sniper nests, and maps marked with kill zones. For the past year, this man has systematically targeted coalition special forces. 23 confirmed kills, likely more unconfirmed. It's always one shot, always fatal. Caruso paused, allowing the implications to sink in. What makes him different, he continued, is his methodology. He doesn't just shoot, he hunts. He studies patterns, anticipates reactions, and sets elaborate traps when direct engagement isn't favorable. Like the trap that killed Torres, Sullivan said quietly. Caruso nodded. Exactly like that. Torres and Wilson died because they followed predictable operational protocols against an enemy who had studied those protocols extensively. He switched to copies of handwritten notes displayed on the screen. They contained pages of meticulously detailed observations, hand-drawn maps, and tactical analysis. These are Torres' notes on the Kunduz sniper, everything he observed, analyzed, and theorized during the months he spent tracking him. Caruso moved to the screen and pointed to a sentence with a star next to it. Torres believed the sniper had formal military training, likely Russian, based on his shot selection and evasion tactics. He operated primarily in urban environments, using civilian populations as cover. The kill school trainees stared at the critical intelligence left behind from one of their fallen brothers. "That's why I've been pushing you all so hard," Caruso admitted. Torres was the best tracker I'd ever worked with, and even he underestimated this target. I won't make the same mistake. He looked each man in the eye. "From now on, everything we do, every exercise, every drill, and every simulation is preparation for what may be the most challenging mission of your career to date, eliminating the Kunduz sniper." Feldman, who had been silently absorbing the information, finally spoke. "This isn't just about eliminating a high-value target, is it? This is personal for you." The directness of the question caught Caruso off guard. He considered deflecting, but instead chose honesty. "Torres was more than my teammate," he said. "He was my brother in everything but blood. We came up through the ranks together, saved each other's ass more times than I can count. So yes, it's personal. But that doesn't make the mission any less necessary." He turned back to the projection. "The Kunduz sniper isn't just killing our operators. He's teaching others his methods. Intelligence suggests he's training a new generation of snipers with specialized knowledge of our tactics, which is why we need to eliminate him before his knowledge spreads further." Sullivan cleared his throat. "I saw him. Before Torres died, he spoke English with an accent I couldn't place. He said Americans were predictable, that our tactics never change." "Did he say anything else?" Caruso pressed. Sullivan's eyes darkened with the memory. "He said he'd kill legions of Americans before we captured him." A heavy silence fell over the room as the operators processed this information. "That stops with us," Caruso finally said. "From this moment forward, we become his worst nightmare. Unpredictable, adaptable, and utterly lethal." He spread additional copies of Torres's handwritten notes across the table. "Study these. Learn everything Torres learned. Then we'll build on his work, creating a new mission plan that the sniper won't anticipate." The men gathered around the table, their earlier exhaustion forgotten as they immersed themselves in Torres's detailed observations. Caruso stepped back, watching as they began to engage with the material, pointing out patterns, questioning assumptions, and building on each other's insights. For the first time since Torres's death, Caruso felt a glimmer of hope. These men, pushed to their limits and beyond, were beginning to display the qualities needed to hunt the most dangerous predator in the sandbox. "Tomorrow," Caruso announced as the light outside the container faded to dusk, "we begin urban warfare simulations, based on actual encounters with the Kunduz sniper." His team looked up from their study, their expressions reflecting a newfound focus and determination. "Get some rest," Caruso added. "You'll need it." Chapter 8. The scent of tea and hashish permeated the cramped second-floor room overlooking Kunduz's central market. Dust particles danced in the slanting afternoon sunlight, casting elongated shadows across the worn rug where Vasily Petrov sat, methodically cleaning his Dragunov sniper rifle. His movements were precise and unhurried, the ritual as familiar to him as breathing. The wall behind him was bare, except for a small mirror and a hand-drawn map of Kunduz with red circles marking patrol routes and observation points. Outside, the market hummed with merchants haggling over prices, children weaving through crowds of shoppers, and the occasional bleating of goats being led to slaughter. The normality of it all provided the perfect cover. No one looked twice at the quiet man who occasionally appeared at the window, dressed like any other Afghan villager, his origins betrayed only by the coldness in his pale blue eyes. Petrov, known to coalition forces as the Kunduz sniper, had perfected the art of invisibility over his 15 years as a weapons specialist, first with Spetsnaz in Chechnya, then as a private contractor in Syria, and now in the rocky terrain of northern Afghanistan. He'd learned that true invisibility came not from hiding, but from blending entirely with the environment so that observers' eyes passed over you, registering nothing unusual. The floorboards creaked outside his door. Petrov's hand moved to the Makarov pistol lying beside him, his finger resting lightly on the trigger guard. 3 quick knocks followed by 2 slower ones, the agreed-upon signal. Still, Petrov waited, listening for breathing patterns, the weight of footsteps, anything that might indicate a trap. "Enter," he finally called. The door swung open to reveal a middle-aged Afghan with a neatly trimmed beard and expensive European shoes that contrasted with his otherwise traditional clothing. Saeed Ghazni closed the door behind him, his movements hinting at urban sophistication rather than a fighter's guarded caution. "You're a difficult man to find," Ghazni said in English, surveying the sparse room with barely concealed disdain. "That's the point," Petrov replied, continuing to clean his rifle. "Your message mentioned new business. I'm listening." Ghazni set his leather briefcase on the low table between them and extracted a manila folder. "My employer remains impressed with your work. The operation against the Delta team yielded exactly the results we anticipated." Petrov nodded but said nothing. He had eliminated 2 Americans and wounded 3 others in an ambush that had required weeks of preparation. The satisfaction came not from the kill itself, but from the perfection of the execution. "We have a new target," Ghazni continued, opening the folder to reveal several photographs. "This is Sergeant First Class Dominic Caruso." Petrov set aside his cleaning cloth and picked up the top photograph. It was a military ID shot showing a square-jawed man with dark eyes that seemed to evaluate the camera as if it were a potential threat. The second image showed the same man in combat gear, directing a team during what appeared to be an operation in an urban setting. "The Butcher of Brooklyn," Petrov said, recognition flickering across his features. "His reputation precedes him." "Then you understand the challenge," Ghazni replied. "He was the mentor of one of the men you killed. Intelligence suggests he's now leading a specialized Delta training program at EFFOB Fenty with the ultimate goal of hunting you." Petrov's mouth twitched in mild amusement. "Americans always think the solution is to train more extensively, to create better killers. They never consider that their methodology itself might be flawed." "Nevertheless, Caruso represents a significant threat," Ghazni countered. "Unlike others, he adapts and improvises. He doesn't follow standard protocols." "All men bleed the same," Petrov said, setting down the photographs. "What's the timeline?" Ghazni extracted a satellite image of a military installation. "FOB Fenty, where Caruso is currently based. He rarely leaves the compound except for training exercises. However, we've received intelligence that he's planning a mission to Jalalabad next week to intercept a shipment of RPGs intended for my employer." "A trap, then," Petrov concluded. "My employer believes this provides the perfect opportunity. Caruso will be operating with minimal support, accompanied only by his trainees. Take him out, and you eliminate not only one of their best operators, but also demoralize an entire generation of potential hunters." Petrov studied the satellite image, his mind already calculating angles, distances, and potential escape routes. "Your employer appears unusually well informed about American military movements." Ghazni's expression remained carefully neutral. "My employer pays well for information. The specifics shouldn't concern you. In my experience, the specifics are what keep you alive." Petrov tapped the photograph of Caruso. "I know your employer is the corrupt Nafez brothers. Their dependency on American weapons and money will be the end of them." Ghazni couldn't hide his surprise. "Then you know why a man like Caruso must be eliminated." Petrov nodded. "And the payment?" Ghazni opened his briefcase again, revealing stacks of American currency. "Half now, half upon confirmation. The usual arrangement." "Double the usual fee," Petrov corrected. "Caruso isn't a typical target. Taking him will require additional resources and far greater risk." For a moment, Ghazni looked as if he might argue, but then he shrugged. "Ahmed Nafez anticipated your request. The full amount is there." Petrov closed the briefcase without counting the money. If the Nafez brothers tried to cheat him, they would not remain in business long enough to regret it. "I'll need detailed intelligence on Caruso's operations in Jalalabad. Entry points, timeframes, and support elements. All included in the file," Ghazni said, gesturing to the folder. "Along with psychological assessments from previous commanders. Caruso is methodical, but unpredictable, which makes him dangerous." "Which makes him interesting," Petrov corrected. "Most American operators are interchangeable with the same training, same responses, and same weaknesses. Someone who thinks differently presents a worthy challenge." Ghazni rose to leave. "The Nafez brothers don't care about worthy challenges. They care about results. You'll have them." Petrov assured him. As always. When the door closed behind Ghazni, Petrov returned to the photographs, studying Caruso's face with greater attention. There was a look in the American's eyes that went beyond military competence, a raw hardness honed by street violence. Petrov knew he should feel nothing toward his targets. Any emotional attachment was a professional liability. Yet he couldn't deny the stirring of interest as he contemplated facing an opponent who might actually understand the game. Rising from the floor, Petrov moved to the window and gazed across the market to the mountains beyond. The Americans had been hunting him for over a year without success. Now they were sending their best, someone who might anticipate his methods, perhaps even his thought processes. Good. In order to be the best, one must defeat the best. Petrov returned to the table and spread out the contents of the folder, immersing himself in the details of Dominic Caruso's life and career. Born in Brooklyn to first-generation Italian immigrants, he grew up in the Bensonhurst neighborhood when it was still controlled by organized crime families. Enlisted in the Army at 18 after a judge sealed his juvenile record. He rose quickly through the ranks in the Ranger Regiment, then Delta Force, known for unorthodox but effective tactical decisions. The psychological profile proved most illuminating. Caruso displayed unwavering loyalty to his men, sometimes at the expense of mission parameters. He had repeatedly risked his career to protect those under his command. The death of the man he mentored would have hit him hard, not just as a professional failure, but as a personal loss. That was the vulnerability Petrov would exploit. Emotional attachments created blind spots. Caruso would be coming to Jalalabad with vengeance in his heart, and vengeance made men careless. For all his adaptability, the American would still be driven by a fundamental need to avenge his friend. That predictability would be his undoing. As night fell over Kunduz, Petrov began planning meticulously. The Jalalabad operation would require multiple stages. First, reconnaissance to verify the intelligence, then preparation of the killing ground. Finally, patience as the trap closed around Caruso and his men. Petrov moved to a locked Timbuktu chest beneath his sleeping mat and extracted a worn leather case. Inside lay a collection of specialized tools, a laser rangefinder disguised as binoculars, wind meters, and a small assortment of non-standard ammunition he had developed himself. Among them was a small notebook filled with diagrams and calculations specific to the Dragunov rifle. Years of experience had taught Petrov that manufacturer specifications were merely starting points. True mastery came from understanding the subtle behavior of your weapon under varying conditions, like how the barrel heated after multiple shots, how different loads affected trajectory, and how environmental factors influenced performance. The night deepened as Petrov continued his preparations, the sounds of the market giving way to the quiet rustle of night vendors and the occasional barking of street dogs. He laid out topographical maps of Jalalabad, marking potential firing positions and escape routes. 3 primary locations emerged as possibilities, each offering different advantages depending on how Caruso approached the area. Shortly before midnight, Petrov heard the distinctive whoomp-whoomp of helicopter rotors passing overhead, an American patrol returning to base. He paused, listening as the sound faded into the distance. Soon enough, he would be hearing those same helicopters scrambling to evacuate casualties. Petrov allowed himself a rare smile. The Americans believed they were setting a trap for weapons headed to the Nefez brothers, never suspecting that they were the prey. The key would be to make Caruso believe he was in control of the situation until it was too late. Let him think his training and street instincts had prepared him for this encounter. Let him believe he had anticipated the trap. Then, when his confidence was highest, Petrov would spring the true ambush. As he returned the maps and equipment to their hiding places, Petrov felt the familiar calm that preceded a hunt. Dominic Caruso represented the best America could field against him, a street fighter turned Delta Force operator with a personal vendetta. The perfect combination of training and motivation. It would make the victory all the sweeter. In the darkness of his room, the Kunduz sniper loaded a single round into his Dragunov and dry-fired at the photograph of Caruso. A clean hit, center mass, just like all his victims. Petrov closed his eyes and visualized the coming confrontation, seeing it unfold with perfect clarity. He'd lure Caruso into Jalalabad, kill him and all his men, leaving a pile of dead Americans in the dusty streets.